Now, following up from the massive reveal of Augusta and Iuno dropping next update, their gameplay was also revealed way earlier than usual, similar to when we did receive early gameplay for Cartethyia, which does come in clutch for players to have a better idea on whether or not they should go in for current version banners or hold off till next update. Now, if you happen to check out my last video, I did touch upon the gameplay of both characters, but in this video I do want to go into much more detail and essentially break down the value Augusta holds in specific with the abilities she does possess, alongside where exactly she will be amazing to utilize. Then I'll be going over some comparisons with other meta damage dealers, including her competition within Electro, before finishing it up with her overall value as our new queen of Electro. Before we jump into it, as always, if you are interested in more WutheringWaves content, would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Kicking this off with what we do already know about Augusta's potential. As our newest Electro Broadblade character, she will in particular be a main damage dealer that will deal standard Electro damage, which means she should have solid versatility with existing characters since there wouldn't be any reliance on a single character to inflict debuffs on enemies. However, just like some other main damage dealers, it does seem like she will require a lot of heal time and will be best utilized as a hyper carry, especially since her abilities do look like a long chain of attacks that you may want to pull off consecutively. So with that being the case, it may be a bit more difficult to quick swap with other characters, but it could still be possible, since there are instances such as when Augusta is riding the Griffin and dealing an attack whilst in midair that could provide a window to switch. Of course, we will know for sure when she does release, but also with the fact Augusta does have a secondary state after activating the first liberation. Similar to DPS characters such as Zani, it does seem like Augusta will want to remain on field and deal as much damage as she can during that window. Now, speaking of the first liberation, and aside from the clean looking animation, it does involve a transformation mechanic, though it wouldn't be for Augusta herself but the weapon she wields, since the insane looking broadblade she wields as standard does switch into a monstrous looking sword straight out of Elden Ring. In addition to the transformation mechanic, it does seem like the secondary state will be Augusta's burst state, which means she will be dealing majority of damage in her rotation only once activating the resonant liberation. Now, during the base state, Augusta does have solid range with her abilities and a ton of it during the supposed resonant skill, which specifically does cover a lot of ground and consists of Augusta flash stepping forward and backwards dealing damage before unleashing a massive attack. Although during the secondary state, that massive sword isn't just for show, since you can pretty much see how far she does reach with each swing potentially dealing massive damage. So then, with that being said, not only will Augusta likely be amazing for Tower of Adversity simply due to her damage potential, but should also be a fantastic DPS to take into WutheringWaves due to the range she is capable of with her abilities. So especially since WutheringWaves is likely the mode players struggle with the most out of the endgame modes, it would be wise to consider Augusta if you do need a hyper carry to take care of one side. If anyone, it's probably fair to say Augusta's playstyle is pretty similar to Zani's, considering both have a burst state that allow them to deal attacks with immense reach and should be able to deal insane levels of damage. So perhaps if you are a fan of Zani's playstyle and wouldn't mind picking up another character that does feel similar, or maybe you skip Zani due to the fact she revolves around the Spectral Frazzle mechanic and just wasn't a fan of being forced into using Phoebe or Spectral Rover alongside her, then Augusta again seems like a great character to consider, since as of now at least she does seem quite similar and just maybe could be capable of rivaling Zani's damage. However, a difference between both characters is that Augusta does kinda have a second traditional liberation, unlike Zani, which does have a second liberation but it does lack the special animation to go with it. Now, with that second liberation in specific, it doesn't only look incredible animation wise, but it seems to cover a lot of ground and should be capable of dealing a ton of damage. Unless of course it does have a low damage multiplier due to the damage multiplier of the normal attacks being extremely high during the secondary state, Regardless, it's not often we do receive a character with 2 liberations that have their own animation, so even with just that, it does allow Augusta to stand out from majority of DPS characters. Though as for a feature that allows her to stand out from not only DPS characters but every other character in the game aside from Iuno, activating the first liberation will literally summon the sun in the air, similar to how Iuno would be able to summon the moon when activating her liberation. Now that may not affect Augusta's DPS and performance, but that has to be one of the most insane features implemented not only into WutheringWaves but Gacha gaming as a whole, which does certainly add to her overall value, and especially for those that do enjoy special effects and animations just as much as the performance of the character. So all in all, just considering Augusta has some of the most incredible animations as a DPS, to the range and smoothness of her abilities alongside the damage potential as the strongest warrior in Septimont, she is certainly going to be a top tier DPS that can carry in all types of content, and so would be worth considering if you're liking a DPS. Now, as amazing as Augusta does seem, and as much as you may want to pull her, it is worth considering for those that were fortunate enough to pick up Changli for free back in version 1.2, you would be less obliged to pull for Augusta, and especially if you have properly invested into him. Similar to Augusta, Changli does have a burst state after activating the liberation where he does deal incredible damage with insane area of effect. Though in addition to that, and where Zhang Liao may have an edge over Augusta will be his ability to slow down enemies, which can be triggered up to 3 times during his burst state, and this would be incredibly valuable in many situations. Augusta, on the other hand, at this moment with what's been revealed, doesn't seem like she will have a similar ability, which means Zhang Liao is going to be a bit easier to play and will be much more suitable for those that may struggle during certain battles. However, even with that said, it goes without saying Augusta will deal considerably more damage overall, given it has been quite some time since Zhang Liao's initial release. Also, in terms of pretty much everything else from animations to the depth of their kits, Augusta is quite the upgrade, and enough to the point that even if you do have Zhang Liao, you couldn't go wrong with picking up Augusta, and especially since he is the oldest meta DPS for his respective attribute. Now, in comparison to other meta damage dealers, it does go without saying we will only have the full picture in terms of how Augusta stacks up against others when she does officially release. But we do have enough when considering her gameplay to at least have a general idea on where she does stand. Unlike DPS characters such as Carlotta and Phrolova, as mentioned, it doesn't seem like Augusta will be able to stagnate enemies with her abilities. Now, in some situations, that ability really does come in clutch, as it could save your main DPS from being completely wiped out, which ultimately does allow characters with this ability to be much more comfortable to use in clearing difficult content. So that would be something to consider if you are used to using characters such as Carlotta and Phrolova. But of course, this can definitely be overlooked if you are experienced enough to dodge and parry most attacks. Now, as mentioned earlier, the closest comparison in terms of gameplay would be Augusta and Zani, considering both characters are essentially brute forcing their way through enemies with their massive broad blades whilst in their burst window. Currently, Zani is one of the best damage dealers available, since in exchange for comfort, she is capable of dealing ridiculous amounts of damage up close, which might then hint at what we could expect from Augusta if she does end up having 0 abilities that can make the battle more comfortable. Although, when comparing Augusta's damage potential against the DPS Cartethyia and Zani in specific are capable of, I am confident with the fact that she will be able to deal similar damage but wouldn't exceed their DPS, since there really isn't any content that requires that sort of damage. However, just know that sort of DPS from Augusta likely won't be possible on release, considering we are still yet to receive her best in slot sub DPS, which will be dropping sometime later on. Till then, then you would be using characters such as Yinlin and other sub-DPS characters that can amplify Augusta's secondary damage type. But once the best in slot sub-DPS does release and you do pair them with Augusta, she should still be a fantastic DPS without them, but will be even more powerful, enough to the point to then possibly rival other meta damage dealers such as Cartethyia and Zani, or perhaps even exceed their DPS. So overall, Augusta as mentioned will most likely be a top tier DPS, and especially when considering her abilities that were revealed. But also since she does have some of the best looking animations in the game. Perhaps not as great as Cartethyia since she really did raise the bar, and especially with her Resonance Liberation. But I would easily see Augusta amongst the best in terms of the full package. Once again, from what we've seen, it looks like Augusta will be a damage dealer that brute forces her way through enemies similar to Zani, which might be enjoyable to some and to others might be a bit difficult and risky to use. But in situations such as Whimpering Waste that require you to clear through hordes of enemies, Augusta certainly has potential to be one of the best characters to use over majority of other characters. So ultimately, if you are more of a recent player that may need a DPS character to carry your account, or even a more experienced player that just wants a new fun DPS character to cleave through content, Augusta as a DPS will hold an immense amount of value and should definitely be considered for your account. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more WutheringWaves content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, drop a comment down below on whether you are planning to pull for Augusta or will you be skipping. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.